like to ask questions about item 10.3, Marilyn.
Yep. Councillor Cameron.
So I guess these questions are for Councillor Lambert since he's moved the motion. I'm just wondering, Councillor Lambert, whether you were aware that there's an online survey regarding the Beeline that's to close on February 28th. It's still open.
And I would imagine that Councillor Lambert has an opportunity to respond to questions.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Usually the question process goes through staff in the instance of a staff report, but in this instance, since Councillor Lambert is the author of the notice of motion, he can respond to those questions. Thank you.
Well, Councillor Cameron, am I on here? Yes. Okay. Yes, I'm aware of that, and if you have a series of questions, I'd be happy to receive those and respond to them on March the 4th.
Well, I'd like to ask whether you, ultimately there's a, is it, I mean, I guess first I'm asking, are you aware that there's an online survey that has been publicized for now 3 weeks or more that it's to close on February 28th regarding the Beeline? I'm just asking if you're aware about that while you're making this motion.
Yes, I am.
Okay, and are you aware that there's a telephone, sorry?
Councillor Cameron, if you have a series of questions, could you please list them, and I will respond to them on March the 4th. I'm not going to respond to them now.
Well, I'm concerned, Councillor Lambert, that on March the 4th, it will be after the online survey and the telephone survey and such are conducted, and the issue is now is the timing of this motion vis-a-vis those consultation processes, so that's why I'm raising them now.
The proper place is to respond to those on March the 4th.
Sorry, just to clarify, I think the chair can determine the appropriateness of the questions with the help of the legislative clerk, but if Councillor Lambert, you don't wish to answer the question, that's your prerogative. Councillor Cameron?
Okay, I guess, okay, well, that's the first question. I'll ask if you're aware that there's an event scheduled on Wednesday by the Capilano University Students Union regarding the Beeline. Are you aware of that?
So order. I'll just ask the public to keep their comments to themselves while we're conducting our business. Thank you.
Do you have a series of questions that you wish to ask me, Councillor Cameron?
I'm
Are
asking.
you asking them one by one?
I'm asking.
I told you that I would give you an answer, and I will respond to those in my introductory remarks on March the 4th.
But what I think is...
And that's all I have to say.
Well, I think the people who are participating in the online survey, the telephone survey, who are still sending us email correspondence, who are holding events on this issue, deserve to know whether you will be considering their points of view or whether you have, by putting forward this motion, signaled that you're not open to differing points of view.
Well, of course I would be open to hear their points of view. The notice of motion does not in any way exclude consideration of those points of view.
When you formulated your notice of motion, Councillor Lambert, did you have a report from staff regarding the results of previous consultation processes?
I am going to reiterate once more and for the final time, if you have a series of questions, would you please give them to me? This is turning into a little bit of a lawyerly interrogation. I'm not a lawyer. I do not appreciate your line of questioning.
These are simple,
that's it.
These are simple questions, and I think the public is entitled to answers to these questions. And I've had concerns expressed to me by the public that there appears to be a fait accompli, and they wonder whether they should be continuing to participate in the consultation process. So it's a simple question. Have you had any report from staff regarding summarizing the previous results of the consultation to date?
I've given you my answer. I've tried to accommodate you, so just keep going with your questions.
Now, what I'm asking is, did you come up with the wording for this motion?
Keep asking your questions.
So I'm asking whether you came up with the wording for this question, or did you
Can
have
I
this?
again ask the public to keep their comments down, or keep their comments themselves?
Keep asking the questions. I'll answer
I'm
those
asking
on
whether you
March
came
4th.
up with the wording or whether you had assistance from staff at all in coming up with the wording for this resolution.
Keep asking the questions. Do you have further questions?
Well, I'd like that question answered. If you're
I
not going to
told
answer it,
you.
that's fine.
How
But
many
I-
times do I have to tell you? I'll answer those
Can
on March
we,
the 4th.
Move forward in a respectful manner. If you don't wish to answer the question, Councillor Lambert, you can say, you
I've
don't
said
have, I
that.
don't want to
I've
answer.
said that a number of times now.
So I'd like to look for some clarification on the motion you put forward. What, did you inquire before you brought this notice of motion whether staff have already been talking with TransLink in Park Royal regarding alternative alignments or bus lay-by locations for a Beeline terminus at Park Royal Shopping Centre? Did you inquire about that before you made the notice of application or notice of motion? It's a-
Councillor Lambert, did you not
I
wish to
have-
answer the question?
I have said, how many different ways can I say that I will answer those questions in my preamble, introductory remarks on March the 4th? I appreciate your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, but what you're asking for, Councillor Lambert, is a resolution to direct staff to work with TransLink, the owners of Park Royal Shopping Centre, the Squamish First Nation, to identify possible alternative alignments, bus lay-by locations for a Beeline terminus option at Park Royal Shopping Centre. And I'm asking you, in the context of understanding this application or notice of motion and whether it will actually achieve anything, whether you inquired first whether any of those discussions had already happened, and if so, what transpired during those discussions?
Again, I will answer those questions on March the 4th. Next question.
Am I to understand from your, is it the intent of your application to, notice of motion to rule out terminuses from the Beeline at anywhere else other than Park Royal? I'm asking, is that your intent? I'm trying to understand
Look,
the
okay.
notice of application.
Just simply, I asked you at the beginning of this series, just list your questions, and I'll provide a response to them
Can I
on March
ask,
the 4th. This is
can I-
not the point of debating.
One second,
Yeah.
one second. Councillor, Mr. Panneton, perhaps the procedure bylaw does allow questions during this period. Perhaps you can explain why that rule is in place
Madam Mayor.
at the notice of motion stage.
Madam Mayor, the intent of the ability of council to ask questions before motion is put on the floor is so that council members may ask staff, or in this case, a council member, for any information that they believe is pertinent in order for them to make up their mind on the motion that will eventually be put on the floor.
And in advance of the actual debate of the motion.
In advance of or on the day of, as the case may be. Thank you.
So the challenge, Madam Mayor, is that we're to come March 4th ready to debate this notice of motion, but on its face, I'm not sure, and it's not clear to me what the notice of motion is asking. So that's why I'm asking Councillor Lambert if what the notice of motion seems to suggest is we should start studying a Park Royal terminus. But I'm wondering if he knows whether there has been such study. He's declined to answer that. And now I'm trying to make it clear whether the intent of Councillor Lambert's notice of motion is to rule out 21st, 24th, or any other Beeline terminus in favor of studying only and considering only the Park Royal terminus. That's a fairly simple question because the community seems to want clarity as to where the terminus is going to be. And if I'm going to speak knowledgeably and coherently on March 4th about that question, I would like to know whether it's going to be on the table in Councillor Lambert's motion or if we're just going to be voting on March 4th whether to study Park Royal and keep all the other terminuses on the table.
And there's going to be plenty of time on March 4th to debate this, and I'll be able to provide clarification to you at that time. That's the purpose of having this notice of motion discussed on the date specified, not today.
No, I'm not, Councillor Lambert, I'm not wanting to discuss the merits of your notice of motion. I'm wanting to simply understand what you're putting forward. And as drafted, it's not clear to me what you're putting forward. And the purpose of giving notice a week in advance is to give people time to understand what's on the table or not, so that they can come, including council members, but also members of the public, on March 4th, understanding what's going to be determined. I think the community wants to know, both those pro and against the Beeline proposal, whether council will be considering ruling out the 21st, 24th Street terminus or other terminuses other than Park Royal, or whether we are just going to be talking on March 4th about directing further study about Park Royal. That clarity is, I think, something that the community will seek, and is certainly something that I am seeking, and it's certainly something I feel that council's entitled to in advance of showing up on March the 4th. So can you please give me some clarity?
As I've said, I'll give you that clarification on March the 4th.
Mr. Panneton, can you also clarify the purpose of a notice of motion in advance of the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Notice of motion is required by the council procedure bylaw. The intent of giving notice of motion is so that council has an opportunity to be prepared to debate a motion that will be coming forward at a subsequent council meeting. It's essentially advance notice so that it's not sprung on council without warning at the meeting of. Thank you.
I mean, my personal view is we should resolve this issue for once and for all, and I'm not sure that Councillor Lambert's motion is going to do that if all it's asking for is further study. So that's why I'm asking this question. He's declined to answer about the terminus. So I'll go down to my next set of questions. On the notice of motion, there's some critical comments in the preamble about the bus priority lanes. I'm wondering, Councillor Lambert, if your intention in your notice of motion is for council to decide on March 4th whether to rule out bus priority lanes west of Park Royal. Is that the intent? Is that going to be a subject? Is that the intent of your notice of motion?
I will give you that clarification on March the 4th.
So again, Madam Mayor, I just will
Yes.
point out that it's going to be, this issue has been festering in this community for months, and I personally want to see it resolved, and what I'm hearing is evasion and a lack of specificity, and quite frankly, I think council deserves better, and I think the community deserves better. So I guess I'll ask, having made no progress here, I will ask one last piece of clarification. Councillor Lambert, is the intent of your notice of motion that we're going to be talking about on March the 4th to rule out parking loss in Ambleside as part of the Beeline proposal, or to limit the amount of parking that would be lost, street parking, as part of the proposal?
I'll provide clarification on March the 4th.
Councillor Lambert, do you need more time to answer these questions?
No, I think it's entirely appropriate to have the time to consider answering all of these questions together as a preamble to the debate on the notice of motion. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing, and being able to answer all of your questions at that time.
Well, Councillor Lambert, did you circulate the wording of this notice of motion to council to ask if we had any questions before you filed it and it was published?
I'll provide that clarification on March the 4th.
Well, Councillor Lambert, I think that's just a state yes/no answer.
Madam Mayor, listen, this is going nowhere.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not trying to be obstructionist, but this changes. I would like to see, and Mr. Panneton, perhaps you could provide some clarification. If council wanted to make actually a decision, a decisive decision, and ruling out aspects of the Beeline that are causing considerable friction in the community, is it your understanding we would have to bring either a significant amendment to this motion or some sort of new type of motion would have to be brought to before the March 4th meeting? Because I can't understand whether it's going to be determined on Councillor Lambert's notice of motion, and so I'm left with a complete lack of clarity. And what do I tell people in the community if they're coming to speak to it?
Madam Mayor, through you